Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Fulfillment demand continues to skyrocket and outpace available labor. To keep up, warehouse operators are turning to flexible fulfillment solutions like 6 River Systems. Utilizing 6 River Systems' award-winning combination of collaborative robots, artificial intelligence, and operational expertise will make your associates and wall-to-wall fulfillment workflow more efficient. No new infrastructure, no change to warehouse layout, easy to deploy and scale, easy to train and retain associates, all at half the cost of traditional automation. Want to take your fulfillment operation to the next level? Go to www.6river.com to learn more. That's www.6river.com to learn more.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I am joined again by Fergal Glynn, who is the VP of Marketing at 6 River Systems. You may remember that Fergal has been on the show. I think this is his 4th time on the show. He may have the most guest spots yet. He might be the winner. I know that Saturday Night Live, I know they do this thing with the guests, the hosts, So Fergal is becoming, the top, I think. He was on the show way in the beginning. I want to say episode 14. And he was on at MODEX right before the pandemic hit. And then we talked to him, I think, back in September of last year as well, to get kind of a sense of what's going on with 6 River Systems after MODEX and what's happened since then. And now we're going to talk to him and get a little update on the state of the industry and 6 River Systems themselves. We're also going to find out a little bit about ProMat, which is coming up, and what they're going to be doing for that. So, Fergal, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Kevin, I am good, thanks. It's nice to be here, and I like that introduction. Maybe I could be the Alec Baldwin of the New Warehouse with all these appearances.
Yeah, I have to get you like a special coat or something. You hit like number 5 or something like that. Yeah, it's
good to be here, Kevin. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. Always great to have you on. And, you guys have been a sponsor of the podcast now for a little while, so I really appreciate that. And you've always been supportive since the beginning back. I think it was episode 14, right? I want to say 14 or 16, somewhere in there. And, it was great to see you at MODEX too as well, the last time we could do something in person and have a good discussion there as well. So, why don't you, I guess, if people are just finding out about the podcast, where have they been? I don't know, but welcome to the show. But, why don't you give just like a brief overview of 6 River Systems and what it is you guys do?
At 6 River Systems, we are building a wall-to-wall fulfillment solution. And what I mean by that is when you think about what you need in the warehouse, from inbound to outbound in order to do fulfillment, the hardware, the software, like we're working to solve those different problems that are associated with fulfillment. Mm-hmm. And we help our customers to meet their customers' expectations. We help them to de-risk their business, and we help them to attract, train, and retain labor.
I would say you did a good job there, Fergal.
Thanks, Kevin.
No problem. So, yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit about the last time we spoke. We were talking about how things had changed since we saw each other in person at Modex, and it had been a couple of months since really everything shut down, and the world kind of as we knew it totally shifted and changed. And a lot of things we were talking about there were how there are big spikes in e-commerce demand and things of that nature. So why don't you tell us, now we're, let's see, September, so we're about 6 months since then, right? So why don't you talk to us about, what's kind of happened over the last 6 months with Six River, and what are you guys seeing in the market, and what kind of challenges are companies still facing?
In the market, Kevin, we're seeing challenges and we're seeing opportunities. And kind of when we think about the past, like there's been, in supply chain, you go back the last 25 years, there's been many ups and many downs. But in the past, kind of you had savvy companies who were investing during downturns to become more efficient and to speed up their recovery. But today, one of the differences that we're seeing compared to in the past is that companies are investing just to keep up with the incredible acceleration in consumer behavior and consumer expectations. And we're seeing that those companies who are investing right now, they're able to take advantage of new growth opportunities. They're able to meet the consumer expectations, and they are getting ahead of their competition.
Interesting. So I mean, so they're utilizing the automation to kind of get ahead now, because before it sounds like you're saying that they were just trying to catch up before, and now that they've caught up, now they're accelerating past, and I guess they're seeing really the realization and the benefit of implementing something like Six River Systems into their operation, right?
And I think it's bigger than just Six River Systems.
Okay.
So like automation, yes, it is a great place to invest if it's right for your business. But like we're seeing supply chain projects both within the warehouse and like also outside the warehouse. When you think about like if you think about the problem of fulfillment, which is from when that customer order is made to them receiving that order. And so yes, within the warehouse there are a lot of problems to solve, but then also outside the warehouse there's plenty of opportunity to go and to decrease costs, to decrease time of delivery to customer. So we're seeing tremendous investment kind of horizontally, like across supply chain. Like we are very focused within the warehouse,
right?
But supply chain itself, over the last 12 months, it has become fashionable.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a magnifying glass.
You can't pick up a newspaper these days where you don't hear about investment going into supply chain, or you don't hear about the new opportunities opening up there. One thing that we're seeing then as a company, as a provider in supply chain, and as a company who's growing fast, and our people are the most important thing at our company, that we're now like seeing inbound talent come to us from both the schools who wouldn't have come to us in the past, and also like other companies who wouldn't have considered coming to, a 240 person technology company who's headquartered in the Boston area, but who's really now kind of global, given kind of what the pandemic has done to offices. So it has become fashionable, and it's a place where students in school are thinking about as this is a career. And like even on 60 Minutes on Sunday night, they had a Boston robotics company who've got very, very cool robots. But the piece of technology that company like showcased as this is what's going to like help us make money is actually a robot for within the warehouse.
Really?
And so it's pretty cool now, Kevin, that a few years ago nobody would really talk about the warehouse, but now it's the fashionable thing. It has become the cool place to work.
Yeah, definitely, and I couldn't agree more. And I think that it's pretty interesting. It's pretty funny because when I started the podcast like 2 years ago, about like that was one of the things I was kind of like, I want to bring more awareness to like these cool things that are happening. And then boom, all of a sudden, we go through this thing, and supply chain, like you mentioned, is like become fashionable. It's become such a big idea because there's been such a impact on getting things like, I mean, we all remember the toilet paper situation, right? So, it's just kind of put this magnifying glass on supply chain, and it's really showcased, how many, I guess, points of product and business that the supply chain really touches, which is pretty incredible when you really sit down and think about it. All the way through, there's so many things that are involved in the supply chain, and I think a lot of people before probably didn't realize. They didn't realize like how involved and how many things go into just getting that box on your porch, right? And now, like you mentioned, with the technology and things like that, is a lot of, quote unquote cool and sexy kind of things going on within the warehouse, which is really cool. So it's good that we've had like this kind of, even though the pandemic is a terrible thing, it's really kind of shined this light on supply chain. And as you mentioned, younger people are getting more interested in that. I remember a couple of years ago, there was like questioning of like, how do we get younger people interested in supply chain? Because, the average age of people working in supply chain is getting higher, and some of like the Apex statistics and things were, saying we need to generate some more interest to get, the future generation of supply chain in there. And it's certainly happening. And I guess you're a testament to it. You're talking about, how you're getting this other interest that you weren't getting before. And you also have a great point there too about the making companies more global and have better access to global talent. So that's a really interesting thing. And I want to touch on something too, because you're talking about the supply chain as a whole, and one thing has been supply chain resiliency. And so I saw you guys actually introducing a keynote at ProMatDX coming up, right, about supply chain resiliency. So why don't you touch on that a little bit and tell us what that's going to be about?
So we've got the honor, and it's going to be my boss, Jerome, who's the co-CEO and co-founder of Six River Systems, who is introducing one of the ProMat keynotes. And this particular keynote, it's called Beyond COVID-19, Building Supply Chain Resilience is the Key to Recovery and Preparing for Future Disruption. And in the keynote, there's a fantastic panel of industry leaders from Clorox, C&S Wholesalers, FedEx, and the American Logistics Aid Network. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be discussing how they are adapting and rethinking supply chains in these times. And kind of, I don't know exactly what the four leaders from those companies are going to cover on the day, but just doing a bit of research in the last weeks as we were thinking about kind of the introduction to the keynote and looking at what examples of what these companies have done over the last few months. One of the things that I didn't know about, but just an example of really innovative thinking, is we all probably remember a few months ago where there was a global disinfectant wipe shortage.
Right.
Well, like Clorox at a site in the US, they fast-tracked a new production line that can produce 500,000 wipes in just 8 hours.
Wow. And
another example of like really innovative thinking and also execution is a collaboration between C&S Wholesale Grocers and Instacart, which enabled e-commerce and same-day delivery solutions to more than 3,000 independent grocery retailers. And so, like going back to the last point around how it's supply chain now is fashionable, and like supply chain is shaking off maybe the old misperception that it's slow moving. That we're now seeing companies who are able to move fast. We're seeing like flexibility and resiliency being built into what we're doing. And there's still a lot of work, Kevin, left to do in terms of resiliency. It kind of, one example where that came up just last week is around the Suez Canal.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of like thinking about resiliency there in the future. But there's so many like really great projects and innovations that are happening now in the space. And so we're really excited to be part of this keynote.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the keynote sounds like it's going to be very topical for sure, and definitely interesting. And some of the the facts that you threw out there about the ramp up of these different companies like the wipes is pretty incredible. And I think you said another keyword in there, which was flexible, right? And, being flexible in the supply chain and especially in the warehouse day to day is incredibly critical. And technology is allowing us to be more flexible as well. So I'm curious, with obviously, Six River Systems and the Chuck system, is able to allow you to be more agile and more flexible. But what else do you think is happening in the industry that's allowing for that flexibility? What kind of technologies are you seeing that are either happening now or maybe like on the horizon that's going to increase an operations ability to be flexible?
Going back to it's a fashionable space to be in, Kevin, and there's investor money coming in. We were acquired a couple of years back. There's been other acquisitions recently in the space. When that happens, like you get people from companies who were acquired maybe going off and setting up their own company. You also get entrepreneurs either coming into supply chain from other industries or, again, very smart people coming out of school who are now setting up their own companies. But like it's still a great time to go and set up a company in robotics, in automation, in the supply chain, because like we're still continuing to benefit from the reduction in processing power, the reduction in both the cost and the size of the sensors that are needed in order to make equipment that's mobile and safe. Okay. And like there's just great off-the-shelf software, be it open source or be it commercial, that you can get today that like would allow you and go make a robot in a fraction of the time that even when we set up our company almost 6 years ago, that we could do things far more quicker now if we were to go and start over again. So like along with those advances, like areas like artificial intelligence and machine learning are just continuing as well to become more accessible to earlier stage companies. There's more data sets to go work on. And then also the warehouse operators are becoming more willing as well to provide access to their data to both startups and like larger companies alike.
Yeah, interesting. And interesting point there at the end, kind of the ability or the willingness to share more information. And I know you guys in Massachusetts, there's a lot of collaboration going on with robotics companies as well, which is really cool. And I think, as you mentioned, these acquisitions and these investments, these big investments they're getting headlines and they're making waves. And I think people are seeing that. So it's bringing different minds, as you mentioned, into the space to create new technologies to help with more flexibility. And I think that's really, really an awesome thing because it's like, as you mentioned, there's still so much opportunity to be able to make these robotic and automated solutions more accessible and drive down cost and make it more obtainable, I guess, to like smaller companies, like saying, robots are not just for the Amazons of the world, right? So you can help these smaller fulfillment centers be more efficient and be more flexible and deal with, some of the challenges that have been out there. And, I think one of the big challenges that we face, and I'm pretty sure we talked about this the last time we spoke, but it has been labor issues. It's been being able to find enough people because of the peaks that are out there and, because of the pandemic, some people just don't want to work, and being competitive with wages and labor rates as well has been difficult in the warehousing space. So are you still seeing that your customers or potential customers are still facing these challenges with sourcing enough labor to help support their operation? Yes,
it's still a massive challenge, Kevin. And it's going to take a while to change that, because if you think about in the US, if you think about in the United Kingdom, and then in kind of Western Europe, the Benelux, the Germany, the DACH region, like we've got warehouses that are concentrated around specific cities. And so like it's not that we can go and acquire land cheap enough just outside of Boston to go and build like a whole bunch of warehouses to try and solve for that. So it's not going to be an overnight fix, but there is a trend, Kevin, that we are seeing that I think will impact the labor challenge. And I don't know in which way, but the trend we're seeing, Kevin, is micro fulfillment centers are putting warehouses closer, particularly for e-commerce, closer to where that end customer is.
Right.
And so today, when we think about the US, you think about the kind of the hotspots, like just outside of Indianapolis. You think of the Lehigh Valley in the Pennsylvania, New Jersey area.
Right.
You think about the Inland Empire in California, areas in the country where very densely packed with warehouses, like pretty big 1 million+ square foot buildings.
Right.
And I believe they will always still be there. But I believe those warehouses where today you might be doing each picking in those warehouses, and then when you do that each picking, you get like single pick for an e-commerce order. There's a lot of travel that needs to happen to get it to, like, say, my front doorstep in the Boston area. And so we're seeing customers now look at, well, like, how am I going to reduce like that last mile, or like that last 50, that last 100 miles? And so we're seeing the companies look at, well, how can we acquire real estate that's closer to where our end customer is? We're ready and providing technology for the companies who are making those investments. Where we're thinking about, all right, so if you have a building that has a smaller footprint, and maybe even in that building you need to make it really densely packed, like we're thinking about maybe there's not enough room for a robot to move. So we're thinking about, well, what is the type of technology that could allow someone to have a pop-up warehouse or to have a micro-fulfillment center like in a city? And what is the type of software, what is the type of hardware that they would need in order to do fulfillment from that building? And so that's a trend that, as I said, I think is going to impact that overall labor challenge.
Interesting. Yeah, it's pretty interesting what you just said there about the pop-up warehouse. I like that because, a lot of the conversation around micro-fulfillment is around really changing what the retail experience looks like. And it's funny that you said pop-up warehouse because, I guess a couple years ago, it was like all the craze was like pop-up shops, right? Pop-up stores. Because it was like a unique shopping experience. It was like a limited time thing. So it's interesting to say pop-up warehouse. So, I think it's micro fulfillment. I agree. I think is going to continue to become a bigger thing. And I think that's the way to get closer to the customer without, as you said, investing tons of money into really expensive real estate for a big warehouse. But I think the pop-up warehouse idea is pretty cool now that I'm thinking about it. Because even like, you think about maybe like a toy company that's, they have their peak during Christmas, right? And they have a pop-up warehouse for like a couple months closer into where the kids are, where Santa goes, right? So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. And I like that you guys are thinking of the technology even outside of the robot, as you mentioned. Like, maybe there's not enough room for the robot because you're probably looking at utilizing these existing spaces. And I think the landscape of, commercial real estate is slowly changing and will probably accelerate more. There's so many, especially with the pandemic, there's so many vacant store fronts and spaces that, it's, to me, it's like, this is like ripe for micro fulfillment, right? It's already in centralized locations. It's already where people are used to going to shop, but maybe now like they just go to pick up an order instead of like going in the store because it just gets fulfilled there. Or it just comes to their door, like in the same day, maybe next day. But it's really interesting that you mentioned that. So, and yeah, I think that it'll probably help with the labor issues as well because much of that will be automated. I can imagine for it to be cost effective, but it'll also be closer to people as well. So it'll be easier to get people to probably commute and come in and, get temporary labor when needed, to be a little more convenient from a traveling perspective, and more population too to pull from as well. So it was really, really interesting point there. I'm happy you threw that out there, the pop-up warehouse. I like that idea.
Well, I want to tell you a bit more then about the pop-up warehouse, if I can. And so this is around the story of Crocs. Now, this warehouse is like the warehouse that we all have in our head. But you think about Crocs, and think about when the pandemic hit, and a lot of people who had office jobs, they're now working at home.
Right.
And so in the spring, the summer, or fall of last year, I at least heard a lot about how comfortable clothing, comfortable footwear and apparel was very, very popular.
Right.
And so Crocs and their consultant, Sedlak, came to us in the summer of last year and said, hey, we're seeing more demand than we can handle in our existing operations. And we have a plan to go to a bigger operation, but it's a multi-year plan. So we need to go and acquire a building, get some space, and put automation in there and hire 400 people so that we can fulfill on our customers' expectations for peak season.
Wow.
So Crocs came to us late last year. They got a warehouse in Dayton, Ohio. They had forecast that they were going to be doing over 75,000 units a day going through that building. They needed to hire and train 400 associates. And with this pop-up design, everything in there had to be flexible and had to be deployed really, really quickly. And so we worked with them, and during peak season of 2020, they used 83 of our trucks in order to go and pick, pack, and ship those 75,000 units a day. One of the amazing things about this story about the flexibility and the speed is in only 2 days of turning the system on, they were able to hit the full throughput, the full volume within that building.
Wow.
And then for their new hires coming into the building, in other operations they had, on average, it would take about a week to train a new associate before to go out and do picking. They were able to reduce that down to less than 1 day.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. So within 2 days, they were doing the 75,000 units a day?
Yes.
Wow, that's crazy. The other crazy thing is to think about there's that many Crocs out there in the world that 75,000 are shipping a day. That's pretty wild. So
everybody loves Crocs. Crocs, and you can fancy up your Crocs. They've got these cool gibbets that you stick on your Crocs to make them unique. So along with all the different colors, you've got kind of the different paraphernalia that you can put on it to really stand out.
Yeah, wow, that's crazy. I mean, I don't have a pair myself, but I mean, my son has a pair and he loves them. So it's definitely kind of crazy. But the fact that you're able to achieve what they needed to achieve in 2 days is pretty remarkable. And on the other hand too, as kind of like a warehouse operations kind of nerd kind of guy like I am. I mean, who else would be doing a podcast on warehouse? I guess a warehouse nerd, right? But being through
Kevin at 9:42 p.m. at night.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, it's the training aspect has always been a huge thing, right? It's because it's time, the time costs, it costs money, and usually when you bring somebody in, it's like, you need somebody now to get started, and waiting like a week to try and train them is just, longer, that you're kind of maybe falling behind a little bit to get up to that throughput that you need. So being able to do it in less than a day is really pretty incredible. And I think it has something to do with kind of the ease of using the chuck system from all different types of aspects. And so, you mentioned the Crocs, and I kind of want to get into a little bit about, some more information about ProMat that you guys are going to do, because before we jumped on here on the call, you sent me the special link to this very cool interactive chuck experience, in which I guess I was actually picking Crocs in there as well. But it's like I guess it's almost like a virtual kind of reality thing on the computer, where you're choosing what you're going to do and what the task is for the chuck to do, and then you actually seems like you're walking along with the chuck, or you're fulfilling the picks on the chuck itself. So talk to us a little bit about that, and how I guess that was kind of developed, and how that kind of came together for ProMat.
One of the things that has become more difficult now in the pandemic, that it's more difficult for a lot of people to travel. If you can travel, it has also become more difficult to go into other people's buildings,
right?
Because as you go from state to state or city to city, and also at different moments in time, there can be different regulations. And then in the material handling space, like I've heard from when I entered this industry, that this industry is kind of the show me industry,
right?
Or seeing is believing.
Yes.
And so the pandemic has made it much harder for people who are interested in seeing new automation in buildings, whether it's our automation or somebody else's automation. It has just become harder to go and visit a building to see the latest and greatest innovations. And so we in the past would go to ProMat and MODEX, and we would have a large presence, and we would invite everybody into our booth, and it was just so much fun to see kind of people it would click with them. They would get that aha moment, right, when they were picking with Chuck. So we thought, well, how can we, given travel is difficult, given we don't know how long this will last, and there is a massive amount of demand for what we're doing, like how can we make it easy for people to just learn a bit more and experience a bit more about what it's like to use our fulfillment solution, but deliver it right to their desktop, no matter where they are. So we put together it's an interactive experience. Some people might call it a choose your path video, right, where like you get to see a point of view, camera angle of somebody working in the warehouse, where like you get to see what they're doing for about 30 seconds, give or take, and then it pauses, and you get prompted with, well, what do you want to do next? So like as an example, one of the things that we show in this experience is we show somebody logging into a chuck, and the chuck starts to move. Now, I know, and like if I explain to somebody in 10 seconds how Chuck works, like Chuck brings the user to the next pick.
Right.
But what we do in the video is once they're logged in, like we pause it and we give a pop-up to the user asking them, well, what do you want to do? So we ask them, do you want to walk away, go get help, or follow Chuck? And then depending on what they pick, we let the scenario play out.
Yeah.
And so it's a fun way to allow somebody to see what it's like to pick, what it's like to induct, what it's like to do takeoff, and even what it's like to be a supervisor in a building with our fulfillment solution.
Yeah, and I got to do it, and it's very cool. I love that, like you said, it has the different options of what you can do, and like if you choose the wrong thing, it tells you chose the wrong thing too, which is pretty cool. But it shows the simplicity too of the system, because the options that you choose your path, as you mentioned, it tells you on the screen, on the truck screen, like what you should be doing. So it kind of gives you the answer there of like what the right path is to make sure that your pick is successful and you move on to the next pick and you do your job essentially as a picker. And it's really cool. I love how you guys did it, and it really gives you kind of that point of view, and like you said, it shows you it gives you definitely that aha moment of the simplicity of the system, and like you using it in that way. I can totally see how you guys are able to bring training down to less than 1 day, like as you mentioned with the Croc situation.
And kind of another use case that we're thinking about, you mentioned training.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, at least when I went to school, we would have, growing up in Ireland, 35 kids would crowd into a classroom, and training was delivered by the teacher in front of the room to all of us huddled into a classroom. And that's very common for how training it used to be as well in the warehouse. But is putting in all your 30 new associates starting today into the cafeteria for training, or into a training room where everybody's huddled together, is that the safest thing to do in the world today?
Can't do that now.
Probably not. And so a use case of this is a way to actually distribute or provide training, but in a distributed manner, where whether it's on the associate's own device or whether it's a device that's within the building itself when they start, it becomes the possibility of a safer way. And not just for what we make, but it could be for any material handling piece of technology in the warehouse. It becomes just a different way to think about, and a safer way to think about that training that you need to give to your associates in the building without having them all gathered around a single person.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a great point too, because I'm in charge of training in my day job as a warehouse manager, and it's been difficult for sure to not necessarily do the training itself, but it's been difficult to set up the training area and the space, because before we had the break room with a big TV. Okay, everybody come to the tables that are closest to the TV, and now it's well, I can only have 2 people at a table because they need to be 6 feet apart, and I don't want people all the way in the back because they may not be able to see the TV, they may not be able to hear. So having some different options like you were mentioning, and something like this interactive experience too, that you can set them up on a laptop or something in a different space or computer, is really the way to go, I think. And I think that's smart thinking on your part as Six Rivers, and it's really interesting, and it'd be interesting to see how that kind of evolves on that side as well, because like I mentioned before, cutting the training time down is really key in an operation to keep it moving and making sure that you're getting your throughput and your capacity up when it's needed. So we talked about the interactive truck experience, and that kind of in its sense is a bit of a product demo. So are there going to be any additional product demos aside from the interactive truck experience? How is that going to work in the digital experience of ProMat this year?
ProMat, we're going to have our product managers for the different product lines, from replenishment, singles, returns, picking, sorting, pack out, and shipping, all available, all hanging around our virtual booth at ProMat. And so they will be available to answer any questions from attendees. Also at ProMat, our customer Crocs, who I mentioned who used us for their pop-up warehouse, will be talking about their story in one of the seminars. Also in another seminar, a 3PL customer of ours, DM Fulfillment, are going to be talking about how they're using the breadth of our technology to run their buildings. And so we're excited to see what ProMatDX brings in this new format.
Yeah.
Or we're excited to be doing it with customers and to be trying to like adapt to this new world and make it easier for both like the listeners of this podcast. Hopefully you'll go check out the interactive experience, and then also attendees to ProMatDX to go and like, try and hopefully we'll be able to deliver that aha moment of using our technology and like keep that conversation going.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's going to be interesting to see, how ProMatDX as a whole plays out. But it sounds like you guys really have the interactive experience is going to be really cool, I think, for people. And then the product demos and obviously having people available to answer questions and things of that nature, I think is going to be a good thing. And in a sense too, I mean, I can imagine maybe having people available in the virtual setting might give them a little more chance to talk to people, because sometimes at the physical trade show there's like a lot of noise going around and things like that and a lot of distractions, so maybe it'll be a little more targeted. I don't know, we'll see how it goes, but it's going to be interesting.
I don't know, kind of aside from supply chain, like my job is marketing, and it's hard to take something that worked really well in the physical world, like a material handling trade show, where you have big pieces of equipment that are brought into a massive convention center, and you get tens of thousands of people walking through the aisles, where you get drawn into kind of the shiny steel and motors, the shiny robotic arms, the shiny collaborative mobile robots. But it's hard to take that experience and like just try and turn it into something virtual. Yeah. Where like let's try to do the same thing but online. Like I think it's very hard to mirror that. And that's why we just try to think about it a different way. And like see how can we have somebody experience like as close as possible like what it was like to go and pick with a collaborative mobile robot, but allow them to do it from their own office. I don't know how long this pandemic is going to last, but I think we do know that things aren't going to be the exact same way as they were when we come out the other side of this. And so like even with trade shows, like I think they're going to be different in the future, because just trying to have a virtual booth, it's not that compelling, I think, to the attendee. And so, my day job as a marketer, I'm trying to figure out, well, how can we make it worthwhile that somebody will spend their time like looking at the screen? Yeah,
definitely, yeah. And I don't envy you. You have a hard job right now trying to make it attractive when the big aha thing, like you mentioned, is like the truck itself, right? It's seeing it in person. But I think the interactive experience is great. So I think it's going to catch a lot of attention. I know for me, like when I went in and tried it tonight, it was really, really cool. And I love that, how you can do it. And I love the point of view angle as well. Because, you see like these product videos of stuff, but it's from like a step back portion, like if you were just standing there like watching somebody do it, but it actually feels like you're doing it, which is really kind of the aha moment, I guess, you're looking for, right? And that's really the point where you see like the benefit and the ease and the simplicity of the whole thing. So definitely really cool. So for the ProMat stuff, you guys, you go to sixriver.com/ProMat-2021 for more information on that, correct?
That's correct, Kevin.
All right, cool. So we'll put that link at thenewwarehouse.com as well. But one thing I wanted to touch on before we close up here, Fergal. So, last time we spoke, we talked a little bit about this here too earlier, but during the pandemic, there's a huge spike, right? There was a unexpected peak for a lot of people in certain industries. But as we are coming to what the traditional peak would be in 2021, what do you think that's going to be like, and how can people start to prepare for that now?
There's different theories. One of the ones that we're seeing in the usage of our technology across the existing customer base. Is whereas in the past we were used to, particularly for like consumer buying behavior, we were used to Black Friday up until the holidays and a massive amount of money being spent. Then we're now seeing that brands and retailers are rethinking that, and now kind of the peaks are becoming more seasonal and more dependent on kind of the offering that either a brand or a retailer has. And so like I think if you're thinking about in past years where you've got this massive wave in November and December, like a theory, and we'll see if I'm right with my bet on this, but a theory is that we're going to see more of those like peaks and troughs throughout the year. And yes, like those intra year like peaks and troughs won't be as big as your November and December peak of years gone by, but we're going to see more and more like spikes in demand. And kind of if that becomes true, like then flexibility within your operation, no matter what type of operation it is, but flexibility within your operation to be able to respond very quickly to those changes in demand, like, are going to become more important than ever before.
Interesting perspective. Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I actually had a conversation with somebody today who was working in an Amazon facility, and they had recently left. They resigned for another job, but they said that they stayed a little longer because I guess Amazon was asking them to stay because it was they were in a peak. And I was thinking, a peak now, like that seems like an odd time to have a peak, right? So I was like, well, what kind of stuff was in this building? And they were like, oh, it was mostly like electronics, like cell phones and cell phone cases and iPads and things of that nature. And we had a peak during this time. And I'm thinking like, that's pretty interesting, because I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I don't know what's driving that, but it seemed odd because it's like a different time of the year than you would expect a peak to happen. So it kind of backs up your theory there. So your bet is looking strong, I would say.
We'll see. Let's come back to this in 18 months, 24 months time and see.
Definitely, yeah. We'll definitely revisit again and talk to you again and get that fifth guest spot in with you. So Fergal, I want to thank you for coming on the show again and talking to me about what's been going on in the industry and with Six River, and also about the upcoming ProMatDX, and also sharing the interactive chuck experience with me. I think that's great, and I can't wait to hear the feedback from others at ProMat. So how can people find out more information about Six River Systems?
You can go visit our website at 6rs.com.
Okay, great. And we'll put that link at thenewwarehouse.com, as well as the ProMat link too. So you can check out that interactive chuck experience when it's unveiled to everybody during ProMat, and figure out how to pick with Chuck. So Fergal, thank you again for your time.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.